and welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List, a podcast about productivity. I'm your host, Erik Fisher, and this week I am ecstatic to welcome back to the show Carlos Whittaker. Carlos previously joined us to discuss his book, How to Human. In fact, I re-released that episode at the beginning of this year because I thought, you know what? 2024 is definitely a year to try to refocus on being human. This time, he is back to talk about his new book, Reconnected: How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Art of Being Human. That is a long subtitle, but it is fully descriptive of what the book is about and what this conversation is about. He did some experiments going screen-free in different locations, and you know me, I'm all about doing testing to limit screens as much as possible. I know we kind of need them. I know we have to use them. I know it's fun to use them, but I also know there is a big black hole, deep, dark downside to using screens too much, and it is a very easy trap to get into getting to that place. In this conversation, we're talking about the integrations of technology, the distinction between solitude and loneliness, the impact of extended tech-free meal times, and how Carlos applied the lessons from the experiments to his everyday life, including his family and his friends. And I just know you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. Even if you don't really want to go full no screen, you'll find some ways to go less screen and have a more reconnected life. Well, this week, it is my privilege to welcome back to the show Carlos Whittaker. Carlos, welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List.
Erik, thanks so much for having me. And I welcome back is true because I've been here before.
Yes. And in fact, and I don't think you know this, I re-released our conversation at the beginning of this year, or maybe it was like the last week of last year, like December something or January something, because you were here last time to talk about your previous book, How to Human.
Yes.
I bet I've got the full title written here somewhere. Yeah. How to Human, three ways to share life beyond what distracts, divides, and disconnects us. And I like that you wrote that word disconnect in there because we're going to go further on that. But I thought, we're heading into 2024. There's a lot of reasons this year could be very disconnecting and unhuman and unhumane. So let's maybe revisit that conversation.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. I love that you did that.
Yeah. So let's start there. For those that didn't hear that, and I definitely think people should go back and listen to that because it's kind of a partner conversation with this one, I think.
Yes.
That book, give somebody the 30-second pitch for what it was and what it is and your perspective and philosophy there.
Absolutely. You know, How to Human. I mean, what a title. And 3 ways to share life beyond what distracts, divides, and disconnects us. I wrote it. It came out of all of the kind of the trauma that we all globally walked through as humans in 2020. And we all did it together. And then we kind of came out of it on the back end, I think a little crooked. I think not necessarily remembering how to human. And, I use human as a verb there. So, the kind of the easy Cliff Notes version is I teach people how to be human. Again, how to see humans that don't look like them, think like them, vote like them, believe like them, see people that are nothing like you, and then actually take it one step farther, not just see them, but free them. What does it look like for us to free people? And so, that book, it's been what I've been talking about, for the last couple of years. I'm in front of companies and churches and businesses and, all the places. And this next book is almost like the How to Human experiment is really what it was. So.
Yeah. And that's what kind of struck me. Again, I told you pre-recording, I was like, I'm on your, I have your newsletter. I subscribe to that. I follow you on social and everything. And I saw it come through and I saw the cover of it. And then the title, Reconnected: How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Art of Being Human. And I'm like, well, I see the thread here. You said a couple of key buzzwords there, and they're not just buzzwords. They really resonate. Is reconnect, screen-free, even Monks and Amish Farmers was cool. Recover, and again, closing it out with Being Human, which called it back to the previous book. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Also,
Obviously,
the
yeah.
longest subtitle in any book
my
ever
gosh,
written.
yes.
I'm like when the publisher first came to me with that subtitle, I was like, it's so long. But then I was like, but it actually needs to be that long. Like I'm glad it ended up being that long.
Well, and the title's a one-word title, and then you got that giant.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
it's 10-1 subtitle versus title.
Totally. Yeah, I love it.
Oh, I love it. Obviously, we've kind of touched on, okay, the previous book, that what that ethos was, what that perspective was, and you were in that headspace. What was it that brought you to the idea? I mean, I think you're doing experiments and things all the time, really.
True.
What was
True.
it about this one that then made you, I mean, was it that let's do chicken or egg. Was it the experiment or the book that came first, and which one kind of led you to the other?
Yeah. You know, I actually had the idea for this book before I had the idea for How to Human.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
So this book actually was an idea that I had, but I didn't really know how to do it. And then as I was, I think it was maybe like the month before How to Human came out, I got like a screen time notification saying like how long I was on my phone. You know, we all get it and we, swipe it away because we don't want to look at it. But it told me my average screen time was like 7 hours and 23 minutes a day. And I was like, I've got a book called How to Human coming out. I'm literally staring at a phone for 49 hours a week. Okay, so like 2 entire cycles of the sun. And so 2 cycles of the sun means not just awake time. If we're just talking about awake time, that's 4 days a week, right? Like, because I'm sleeping half of those 49 hours.
Yeah.
So 4 days a week, that's more than half my life I'm spending. And I've got a book called How to Human coming out. So that's when I said, okay, wait a second. Like this is going to take me a step farther. And then I started thinking, Erik, I was like, I feel like almost every single time that I'm not human, that I'm feeling rage, that I'm mad or I'm angry, it always has a screen connected to it. So like I'm mad at something I read. I'm mad at something I watched. I'm mad at a text message I got. I'm mad at all these things that are only coming to me through my phone. What is happening? And so, the kind of guy that I am, I was like, well, let's just go all in. So I did. I flew to LA, got my brain scanned by a neuroscientist at 7.5 hours a day on my phone. And then I didn't look at a screen again for almost 2 months, for 7 weeks. And then I got my brain rescanned at the end to see what happened.
Okay. So that number 7, why 7 weeks? I mean, people say all these things about it's 21 days to a habit. I think that's actually been debunked to a certain extent. I think it's longer and shorter depending upon what it is, but why 7?
I don't think there was a certain reason why, besides when I went to Dr. Amen, the neuroscientist, when I first was talking to him about it, and I was like, I think initially it was just going to be maybe 3 weeks. And I just remember him saying, I just don't know if you're going to be able to see anything in 3 weeks. Like if you really want this to and he's like, and to be honest, I don't know if you'll be able to see anything in 7 weeks, but the longer you do this, the better it's going to be for you. And so I just kind of started clearing my calendar. I looked, when can I do this? I canceled a couple speaking gigs. And I said, let's just, honestly, 7 weeks was what it felt like way too long. Like it felt for me, for someone that does what I do for a living, like I make my money talking to my phone. So, like how am I going to not look at it for 7 weeks? And so I think we got to a month and then it went to 5 weeks. And then my wife was like, hey, well, I'm kind of jealous that you're going to be like the most pure version of who you are with just these strange monks and Amish people that don't even know you. But that means we don't get any of the benefit of that. Like you're going to have to do this with us too. And I was like, oh, so let me do that. So then it just kind of ended up 7 weeks. And I'm glad 7 weeks was the perfect amount in order for me to, I think, really pull out all of the learnings that I needed to pull in order for this to feel like something that could really change people's lives.
Yeah. So, okay. So you brain scanned obviously before and after. Maybe you don't necessarily need to go into like what was the before and after comparison, although I think people are curious. What was the benefit of doing that? Like what made you think to do that? Somebody say, hey, we want to see how crazy you really are. No.
Yeah. I think that the initial idea had nothing to do with the brain scan. The initial idea was just, the book would have been just as profound, honestly, had I not got my brain scanned. Okay. Like the learnings and the lessons that are in the book are really profound. They really will, I believe, change any reader's life. And so like, I felt like that was going to be the case. Like I was like, listen, if I'm not going to look at a phone for or a laptop or an Apple Watch or an iPad or a TV for 7 weeks, I'm going to have some nuggets that I can really, give people. So like the book felt solid without it. But then I think I was, scrolling TikTok and I saw this quirky doctor guy that had like 3 million TikTok followers. And I was like, who's this guy? And he had a show called Scan Your Brain or something. He was scanning like Miley Cyrus's brain. And I was like, you know what? I kind of went out on a limb and I was like, I wonder if he'd scan my brain before and after. And I wonder if anything would change. So I just sent him a message on TikTok, or maybe it was Instagram. I can't remember. But within 30 minutes, I had a reply going, we'd love to scan your brain. Come on. And I was like, oh my gosh, no way. And so, it was a little bit of like, I don't even know if there's going to be any difference. I didn't even know if I was going to put it in the book because I was like, what if I do this and my brain is worse? Right? Like what if, but no, it wasn't worse. And there was a lot of crazy things that happened. And so there was also, a side that, my father has dementia. And so I'm really into brain health. Yes. And so I kind of wanted to, talk to him about like, what can I do to prevent, this? If I've got a gene or something that is leading me that way, how can I hold it off? And so there was a lot of reasons why I wanted to go the neuroscience piece. And honestly, I'm so glad I did because I feel like now I've got evidence of it. It's not a scientific experiment. I was lab patient number 1. There wasn't a bunch of test subjects. There wasn't different groups. So it was 100% not a scientific experiment, but it was this one guy's journey that my brain changed. And sweet, I'm pretty pumped about it. And so, so I go deeper into that in the book.
Was there anything that stood out to you in terms of, did they talk to you about like that first scan, like, hey, this is what we're seeing, like prior to doing the experiment?
Oh yeah. I got my brain scanned, and actually, just so people know, I'm going to be on Dr. Amen's show with the 2 scans that I had in his office, and that's going to come out the week my book comes out. Sweet. And so you'll be able to watch it on YouTube, and you'll be able to see. Yes, he spent an hour with me going over my brain before. And he spent an hour with me going over my brain after. And so before, he's like, yeah, I mean, it was so crazy. He's like, you see, he literally points at a part of my brain and he goes, did you play competitive soccer growing up? And I was like, yeah. He's like, 100% I can tell. You see this little dent right here at the top of your brain? I see this in only soccer players. Football players, I see dents all over the head. But soccer players, because they hit the ball over and over right here, I could tell. So it just was so mind-blowing to see, like, he's like, let's see if we can't smooth that bump out, if we can fill in that dent a little bit, And so, it was pretty cool. We had some really cool conversations that everyone will be able to hear.
That's awesome. So I'm going to look for that. Make sure to throw that link in the show notes so people can jump off here and jump into that and dig even deeper. So that's awesome. Let's talk about this. Like, how did you decide, like, specifically, okay, monks, Amish farmers, because that's not, who you usually you hang out with lots of cool, different, diverse people, but that's not necessarily regular. So how'd that come about?
Well, so, here I am, like, I've got this phrase that my Instagram audience knows that I say all the time is, we don't stand on issues, we walk with people. I say that all the time. Carlos, where do you stand on this issue? I say, I don't. I walk with people. That doesn't mean I don't have an opinion on issues. It just means that I'm walking as opposed to just standing, right? And so I thought, well, here I am, Mr. Don't Stand on Issues, Walk with People. What are subcultures of people that I have no idea who they are, and probably I'm going to disagree on a lot of things with, that I could live with? Let me do some monks. Like, I'm not Catholic. I don't, understand a lot of Catholicism. I definitely don't understand monasticism. So that's a group that probably lives and believes some different things than I do. Oh, how about the Amish? Like, they are the most. People like to talk about how conservatives are, or how liberals are these days. Let me tell you, ain't a liberal as liberal or a conservative as the Amish are conservative. They have, like, they have that in spades. Like, they're literally conserving their way of life because they believe that is the truest and best form. And I am not the most conservative human that anyone would ever meet. So I was like, perfect. Let me go live with them. Like, so I was trying to specifically find groups of people that may have a different worldview than me, and see if I could really put my money where my mouth is and do this How to Human thing, this book that I'd written, in a way that is transformative to me, and luckily is I was just like, well, then, they're not really attached to their phones, at least as much as I know. Monks aren't, or Amish aren't. And little did I know I was wrong. But I got to live with these, and literally, this is not exaggeration, some of the greatest relationships I've ever formed in my life were formed at the monastery and in the Amish community of Mount Hope, Ohio. And Willis and I, who are on opposite ends of a lot of spectrums, we call ourselves Willows when we're together, because we are just one. He's one of my best friends now. I love him. And I think just that aspect of it was like why I chose to live with them.
And obviously it brings along some of that atmosphere or scenery. It's the right place, the right time for the experiment, because of what you were going into it for that solitude. And some people would say, okay, I don't know if I can handle one. I don't know that I can handle staying in my normal environment and giving up my screens as much as you did, but let alone then go and transport myself into something that's solitudinal and even alone, because they'd think I'm going to be lonely. What's that difference there then for you between like solitude and being alone? They're not the same thing, really.
No. Well, and and I would say to anybody that thinks, I don't know if I could do that, you're absolutely right. Because I barely could. I definitely had the first 3 or 4 days at the monastery, because I went to the monastery first. So just imagine I'm on my phone 7.5 hours a day. And then I go to a place where there's 23 hours a day of silence, and I can't get out of my head. And normally when you get out of your head, you just open up TikTok or Instagram, you start swiping, and boom, you're out. Your worries are gone. You're now looking at other things. I could not get out of my head. And so it was 3 or 4 of the hardest days I've ever had. And it was the solitude. I think there was loneliness as well, but loneliness and solitude are different, right? So I don't think that loneliness is something that we particularly need to bring into our lives, but I do think solitude is something that we need to bring into our lives. Like, you can be in a room filled with people and still be alone, right? But solitude is something that you have to try to get. Like, we're the first generation ever to not have access to solitude anymore. We're literally the first generation to not have access to solitude. And solitude is so important in healing. Solitude is so important in really finding who you are and being able to have a lot of self-discovery. And I just think we're just moving too fast, and the volume of life is way too loud for us to even realize the things we're supposed to be realizing. And so when it's all taken away, when all the noise is gone and you're just left with a little bit of solitude, it changes everything. And actually, I fell in love with it, where I was so scared of it at the beginning. By the time I left the monastery after 2 weeks, I was actually so sad that I wasn't going to have that solitude anymore. Because let me tell you, moving from the monks to the Amish was moving from a cave to Manhattan. It was like I went from living in a cave to New York, to Times Square, New York. The Amish go so fast. They go so hard. They're around each other all the time. They're talking all the time. It's like, but the monks was slow, Godspeed, quiet. And I missed it. I didn't even realize how much I would miss solitude. And the reason why is because I didn't know that I would, because I hadn't had it in so long. And so when I finally got it, I was like, this is so necessary. So I've, begun to build solitude in my life in different ways. And again, remember that I'm not asking for people to be lonely. I'm asking for people to be still and to let their brain have a break. To let we're actually, I think, addicted. When I was having all of those panic attacks and heart palpitations the first few days, it's because I was coming off of the drug of knowledge and the drug of control. And I was just so addicted to those things that when I didn't have them anymore, my body started to react. And so, yeah, everything you said is true. It was hard, but it was definitely healing once I got past that initial shock.
Well, and then obviously past the Amish, you ended up eventually back home, still continuing the experiment, but being with your familiar and your family, and your familia even. And it's like, there you go. So, and it takes kind of that exiting the situation or the environment. It takes that kind of being in an other type situation to be able to get any kind of sense of what it could be like to then acclimate / regulate or regularity
Yeah.
That's not a word, but it is now, into your day-to-day life, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. And, again, my wife was like, it's not fair that you're going to be able to be Amish Carlos without me. I want to see a little bit of it. And yeah. And so during those 3 weeks, I was able to begin to apply a lot of the principles and a lot of the things that I learned with the monks and the Amish into my regular life, even though I didn't have a phone yet. Like I was with my family for 3 more weeks without a screen. And, and so the book is filled the end of every chapter, I give handlebars to the chapters are on control or solitude or the table or getting lost or wondering, all these things that we don't do anymore. I really tried to give the reader some very simple but applicable ways to do these things. And again, I don't think I've said this yet, but when you read the book, you're not going to feel any shame about being addicted to your phone. Like I made sure that this book isn't about why phones are bad. This book is about why what's on the other side of the phone is beautiful. And when you fall back in love with what's on the other side of the phone, inevitably you just pick your phone up less. I'm on my phone less than 3 hours a day now. I was on my phone almost 7.5 hours a day. So Carlos, have you set up rules? Like what? Like, do you have screen time set? No, I've got no rules. I've got nothing. But you know what I do have? I've got a new love for getting lost. I've got a new love for wondering. I've got a new love for solitude. And all those things are way more important than the dopamine hit that my phone gives me. And so once you taste how good it is, I'm telling you, you're just going to pick it up a lot less.
So we talked a little bit about that whole 7 weeks, and it was kind of just, okay, you took what you could get or figure out how to, barrier off in your schedule. A lot of people listening to this are like, I don't even think I could find one day. I bet they could, but like they could find a day or a weekend or even kind of a,
go shorter than
evening.
That.
Pick one evening a week that's screen free. Start
yes.
there. But
and I would say this, pick an evening and don't make it just screen free. I want you to take your phone somewhere and I want you to drop it off at a friend's house. And then I want you to leave it, because that's actually the kicker. The kicker isn't just go put it in your room, because it's still there. What you're going to have to break is just for 3 hours, literally just 3 hours, have your phone at a completely different location than you are spending, and just start there. Start with 3 hours. That's it. You don't have to go 7 weeks, 3 hours, and then let the 3 hours turn to 6. And then maybe you can do an entire day. But I think that's all we need to get to. Because once you start doing that, then you're going to start falling in love with that. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I feel so much more human now. And it's just true.
All right. So then we do that. We start with that. We inch towards that. But obviously one of the key pieces, especially when it comes to like addiction, is not to just quit cold turkey. You want to replace with the good when you move the bad out of, we aren't making the judgment of phone equals bad, sure. But when we're trying to break a habit, let's go that route. We put the bad thing out of the way and we put the good thing in its place.
Yes,
what are some
absolutely.
of the substitutes you're talking about here?
Oh my gosh. So here's some of the things that I've done. If again, we're not calling phones bad, but if your reliance or addiction, you can't stop scrolling at night right before bed. The data shows that the last 15 or 30 minutes we're awake before we fall asleep. And then the first 15 to 30 minutes we're awake after we wake up. Because we use our phones as our alarm clocks, we're consuming more content than like my great grandparents' generation consumed in a month, right? So like we're already consuming. So like, what are some things you do? Well, buy an alarm clock and charge your phone in the kitchen. And now when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to pick up your alarm clock and start rubbing its face and touching it. No, there's no notifications for you. All it's going to do is wake you up. And guess what? Those first 30 minutes you're awake, if you don't pick up your phone, and those last 30 minutes you're awake, if you're not scrolling on your phone, I'm telling you, now you've literally ushered in an entire hour into your life where you're living. Whereas before you weren't. I promise you, when you're scrolling on your phone, you're not living. That is not living. And so you want to add an hour a day of life. Just do like that kind of thing. Another thing that I do now is like I no longer let my phone tell me where to go. Like I've stopped using Siri and maps for directions. Like there's a part of our brain that I've found in a study that is actually beginning to atrophy because we no longer find our way without Siri barking at us, turn left, turn right, 300 feet, 900 feet, like all those things. Like I now, like, just like it's 1996 with MapQuest, like I look up the address, I look up the directions, I write it down on a napkin, and then I get to use my brain on the way to where I'm going. And guess what? I'll get lost. And I'll make a wrong turn. But when I make the wrong turn, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never been on this street before. That's a really nice house. Oh my gosh, what a great, and then I start finding things I never would have found before. So again, that's another way, getting lost, finding our way. Oh, third, we our phones don't allow us, literally, just like solitude, we're the first generation to lose wondering. Like, we don't wonder anymore. Wondering is gone. If you're ever in a group and you're at dinner and someone's like, hey, I wonder what happens. People pull their phone out. And then Google ruins wondering. It's over, right? And so I had to wonder for 7 freaking weeks. If I walked outside of the monastery, I was like, man, it's hot. I would reach in my phone to find out how hot it was. Guess what? I couldn't tell. I never knew how hot it was. I never knew how cool it was. I just had to wonder all the time. And because I let my mind wander in my wondering, man, the ideas that I got, more questions that I had started to come. So creativity is getting squashed because we find the answers to what we're looking for so quickly. So, bro, as you can tell, I could speak for another freaking 3 hours on all of the things that I learned that we've forgotten how to do because of these things. And I've fallen back in love with those things again. And it's really given me a lot more life.
Sounds like the title, Reconnect. You're reconnecting with wonder and curiosity and even doubt. You don't like every single yourself, every thought you have, being present. Let's talk about that. Being in the, I had a college professor who said, wherever you are, be there. And that always kind of stuck with me. And it's like, okay, and that's great. But like, we also forget that like we can jump in at any moment by picking something up and be anywhere and every time.
Yes.
Elsewise.
We suddenly are, we think we have this, like, and nobody would ever say this, but we kind of act like deities. We act like little mini gods. Because why? Well, because we're all knowing now. Like we can be anywhere in the world at any time. We can see what's happening anywhere at any time. And again, I just don't think we were created for that. Like, how can you be present? Here's a great example. On this wrist, I used to wear an Apple Watch. Now, I'm not judging people that wear Apple Watches anymore, but can I tell you something? I took it off for the experience. Actually, like, it was on my wrist for like the first 4 days I was at the monastery. The battery had died, but I had a watch tan, like, so horrendous that I like didn't want to take it off. So I just had it on my wrist, and I remember I would like turn my wrist to look at just so that it could show me what time it is or whatever. And it was just black. And I just remember being like, there's no notifications going off on my wrist. There's no notifications going off in my pocket. Every conversation I was in for 7 weeks, the person in front of me, I was fully present with them. There was not something that buzzed for a moment and made me turn my head and look back. Because the second you turn away from being present in a conversation because something dinged or buzzed on your body, it's gone. The connection is gone. You have now literally transferred yourself into another realm in space where somebody else is more important than that person. And even though we're used to that now and people don't get near as offended anymore, you have literally left. It's like you're in, the freaking Upside Down or something on Stranger Things. You've left reality. You're in an alternate reality, and then you come back. But imagine this, Erik. For 7 weeks, that never happened to me. I never got one notification. I was fully present at all times. And man, if that wasn't a gift, I don't know what is. So now, of course, I got a couple notifications that go off on my phone, but most of them are gone now. Like, if my family, even if they text me, I don't get a notification. I only get a notification if they're calling me, because I know if they need me, they're going to call me. They're going to text me. I'll check it. So yeah. So all of those things, man, it's just so, but presence is such an important, I think, reminder for us to, what can we do to be more present in the moment? Again, a lot of it, us are just going to have to lose the connection to the notification or to the device, whatever it is.
Now, obviously, some people out there, they're like, well, and you eventually went back and you were home still practicing this. And they're thinking, how do I negotiate this new way of being with people that aren't yet, haven't arrived? They aren't there yet. What's that? How do you evangelize your family towards screen-free? Yeah. Or more, less screen, screen time life.
You don't have to evangelize. Here's the thing. My kids, it's so funny. Well, I never made one rule for them when I got back. I never made like anything. They saw me and who I had become without it. And they literally, their jaws hit the floor. Like, they were just like, I want that. Like, I want more of that. And so like now, and then they're like talking to each other like, hey, how much screen time are you on today? Like, oh, and like they're challenging each other, and it became less and less for even them. And so I didn't have to become an evangelist for this, because I was such a different person that I think everyone that knew me, even my friends, they're like, Carlos, you literally, I thought you were a good friend, but I think you were a horrible friend now. Before, because you're such a good friend now. Like I'm just so focused in conversation with them. And, I just think that when people see what it's supposed to look like to recover the lost art of being human, when people see you in that art form, it's so desirable. People want that so bad that I've found that more and more people are doing it just because they see me doing it. And so again, I haven't had to stick any rules in. Not saying that before I went that we didn't have rules, or even now that we don't have rules. Rules are fine. But I promise you, if you dive in yourself, your friends and family are going to see it and want some of that themselves.
What's been something that was a deeply impactful change that, from any of the three kind of time periods, the monks, the Amish, and then back with family, something that really was you yourself were shocked by how profound a difference the process or the experiment was having on you in those moments?
Easy. The table, meals. When I was with the monks and when I was with the Amish, mostly the Amish, all of our meals were lasting an hour and 20 minutes, 2 hours. I'm talking about not dinners, like breakfast, lunch. And they were lasting so long that initially I was like, man, we're eating a long time. But then I started to realize some of the conversations we were having around the table, some of the conversations we were having, we were disagreeing deeply about worldview things, me and the Amish. Surprise, surprise, that happened. And guess what? We were disagreeing over a shared love of something that but this steak is so good. I mean, what's your steak taste like? And so we've got this commonality, right? In between us, and we're sharing the love of the food while we're sharing a disagreement over maybe some political issue or whatever it may be. And the length of time we would be able to have at the dinner table, literally we were able to disagree and then come back to connection someplace. Here's the kicker. 100 years ago, the average American meal lasted 90 minutes. In 2023, the average American meal lasts 12 minutes. 12 minutes. So tell me this. Why in the world can our family not disagree without hating each other anymore? Why can't our kids be able to have crucial conversations with people because they don't have anywhere to practice? And your home is going to be the safest place for some of these things to do. So what have I done? I have extended all of my meal times. Literally, if I've got a friend coming, they're like, hey, can we have lunch? I was like, yeah, sweet. Can we do from 12 to 12:30? No, actually, then I can't do it. I can do from 12 to 1:15. That's a long time. Yeah. But that's having a meal together. That's just not eating together. So I'll tell you, that thing's been profoundly shifting for me and my family. Is, again, this book's, I did this experiment a year ago, or 2 years ago, this month. And since then, our meal times have probably tripled in time. And it's become one of our favorite parts. So yeah, it's going to feel weird at the beginning. Just start with 30 minutes. If you're just 12 minutes, start with 30, and your kids are probably going to be like, what are we supposed to do for 30 minutes? And there'll be some awkward silence and all kinds of things will happen. But I promise you, it'll be one of the greatest gifts you can give your family.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, we've tried to do some of that and we've been making progress there here at our table, and I've been loving it, and love to go out and do that and sit and just linger.
Yes, linger, bro.
Yeah. So
savor.
I think one of the other things people are thinking is, Carlos, you are so prevalent. You're so present on social media. How do you balance that connection versus connection in face-to-face, atmosphere? What's the difference there? Do you now see a difference between those two realms and the connection that can be had between those two?
Yeah. I mean, I was way over-connected digitally. I was way over-connected with people that didn't know me. And to be quite honest, when I disappeared for 7 weeks and I popped back up, the amount of people were like, oh my gosh, wait, I didn't realize it. So now you were gone. And I'm like, oh, I mean, when you have those realizations that people actually are not going to miss you. I mean, sure, maybe some people will, but no, the people that miss me were my wife and kids and my friends. And man, I have, people probably, if you look back at my history of Instagram use in the last 2 years, it has dramatically declined. There'll be 3 or 4 days in a row that go by and Now, if that ever happens, it used to be people are like, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? What's going on? Now it's just what I just do normally. Like I'm appreciative for the community that I've built online. I think that the words that God gives me, I think it can change people's lives. I love storytelling. I love making reels. I love telling the story of my parents across the street and my dad with dementia. Like I love all those things, but they're really way, way, way down on the list as far as what community really means for me. Not that you can't find true community online. I've made some great friends online, but it just will never touch breath to breath. It will never touch face to face and sharing meals together. And so, so I probably, again, like I said, I'm under 3 hours a day on my phone. Most of that 3 hours is on Instagram. Most of that 3 hours is I'm answering DMs. I'm, doing the things, but still, like, that's a long time to be on Instagram. So, yeah.
It's not nothing, but it's definitely worth it. I think, again, going from where you were to less than half daily, like the compounding of that time, you add it all up in a week. I think it's a little, I don't know about you, but I always noticed that that screen time notification used to come on a Sunday morning, and I'm like, that's a guilt trip and a half on a Sunday morning right there. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Well, and I have cut my screen time by more than half, which legitimately means that I have added more than half of my life back. And when I think about it that way, I'm like, that is freaking crazy. That I've legitimately, whatever life I was losing, I've cut it in half, which is just a lot more living now. So
yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there, they want to jump in on this. So, and this is coming out right as the book is dropping.
Let's go.
Where do you want to send people? Is there a site? Is there a place? Obviously, we can link up to all the socials in the show notes and people can click through. But where do we want to send them?
Send them to reconnectedbook.com, reconnectedbook.com. And there, I think we're going to keep the a couple of the pre-order incentives going for about a week after. So if you want to get, I've got a documentary coming out about the book, and that's coming out in October. I've got a 10-minute sneak peek for that. I also have like a journaling guide where I give you questions for every single chapter that you can download as a PDF. And that's actually really cool. I'm the most excited about that thing. It'll just kind of help ask some extra questions. Ask yourself some extra questions as you're really processing. Okay, what does my relationship with screens look like? How can I reconnect again? Reconnectedbook.com. And then, all the socials. Come hang out with me whenever I'm there.
Perfect. Yeah. And again, I remember it earlier. I said I was going to grab the doctor's show where he scanned your brain.
Yes.
Where you already talked to him, sat down with him, and went over all that. We're going to link over to that in the show notes for this so people can jump off here and jump into that as well and keep going with this conversation. But this is good stuff. It's great for you to have brought this up. It's definitely timely and needed. And I'm so glad you came back, and I want to keep having you back, Carlos. So
let's go, bro.
Keep going.
I want to keep writing books, so keep your podcast going, and then I'll keep talking to you.
Will do, yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Carlos, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
See you, man.
Well, that's another podcast crossed off your listening to-do list. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Carlos Whittaker. I love having him back. Trust me, every time he's doing something, he will probably be back next time. It is so fun to have a human conversation with him about these somewhat heavy topics, but they don't have to be. I really encourage you to grab the book and move beyond just what we talked about in this conversation. There's so much more in there. You'll find the link to that in the show notes for this episode, which you'll find at beyondthetodolist.com. That's also where you'll find different tools that I use to create this show. Make sure to check those out. There are a ton of great tools in there, including my top productivity books list. And don't forget to support us and support this show by checking out our sponsors, also linked there at the show notes. If you found this podcast helpful, I would love for you to do me the favor of reconnecting with someone you know needs to hear this conversation. Share it on over to them, either at the show notes I already talked about, or hit that share button wherever you're listening to this, your podcast player app of choice. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next episode.